Howdy folks, and welcome back to another Koei collection video. And in today's episode, we're actually going to be bringing back an old series. For those of you who have been here a while, you'll probably know what it is, and that is going to be our monthly community video series. In the last video, which was made roughly about a year ago now, we went through and reviewed your favorite Dynasty Warriors characters. And in that video, Jacob asked you guys to share which Musou game you felt is the most underrated and why. So in today's video, that's exactly what we're going to be exploring today. But before we dive in, folks, it's important that I ask you a question for next month's video. And that question is, which Dynasty or Samurai Warriors character do you believe is wildly overrated? If someone comes to mind, let us know in the comments down below which character you feel is the most overrated. And in next month's video, we'll take a handful of those comments and respond to them in kind. Very, very excited to open up a discussion in the comments again. It's been far too long for this channel that we've done something like this. But with that being said, enough dilly-dallying everyone, let's just get straight into some of these comments of which Musou game you guys feel is completely underrated. Now, starting off with our first comment, we've actually got a fellow warrior and channel member, Duck, who has left a comment saying that Dynasty Warriors Gundam 2 is probably their most underrated Musou game. If you happen to be a fan of Mobile Suit Gundam and love Dynasty Warriors, you should check it out. It's a blast. Just like Dynasty Warriors 5, you get to follow individual officers throughout major battles, and while you can't really change the outcomes too much, it's still a great retelling of the stories. Gameplay can be a little bit clunky, especially with space battles, but the fact that they even included space battles in a Dynasty Warriors game is crazy. Now, Duck, what I would initially say to that is that it's incredibly hard to comment on a game that I've just never personally played before. Somehow, I've just completely missed the Gundam series. I know that it's easily accessible, especially on the Xbox 360 or PS3, but it's just a game that I've never gotten my hands on, and I kind of regret it because I do hear good things about them. But with that being said though, as we make our way through reviewing more Musou games, I'm really hoping to explore the Gundam series and other Musou spin-offs, of course. But what I can say from the outset is that this game does look really great with the number of enemy units that fit on screen, especially from the Xbox 360 and PS3 era. I know that we're so used to seeing so many peons on screen, and you know, potentially from the Dynasty Warriors 6 and Dynasty Warriors 7 era, we're used to seeing so many people on screen. But I think with the detail of all the mechs and just, well, I don't know if I should be saying mech or Gundam, but you know what I mean. Basically, the number of figures and detail on the screen, it just looks really impressive. And overall as well, I'd just say that the actual presentation is great, especially with the lasers and the particle effects when they're firing on all cylinders. Just looks incredible, especially the cutscenes as well. Oof. Chef's kiss. But from what I've seen online, as well as Duck's comment here, there seems to be a lot more content included in this package that was sorely missing in the previous title, and there's just overall more replayability. One of the things that I have heard from the first Dynasty Warriors Gundam game is that it's not exactly the most replayable title, but this game clearly is a step above its predecessor. Now, just out of curiosity and for the sake of this video, I tried looking into the sales figures, and apparently this game did sell really well in Japan, with it actually selling 100,000 units on its first day of release, which is pretty fucking impressive if you ask me. But apparently globally in English-speaking countries, not so much. And to be fair, I can definitely recognize that Musou spin-offs can be commercially successful, just like the Hyrule Warriors series, for example, but that also may be dependent on the IP that it's connected to as well and how broadly appealing it is globally. But as far as Dynasty Warriors Gundam or Dynasty Warriors Gundam 2 goes, if I were to have a stab in the dark, I'd probably guess that this title would be considered underrated, purely just because, at least from my perception, it doesn't have that same global pull or instant popularity as a standard Dynasty Warriors game. But for those of you who have played this title, I'd really love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, whether you think it is underrated or whether you think it's appropriately rated. You know, there's overrated, there's underrated, so I don't know if it's just rated, I don't know. But either way, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you have or haven't played it, be very keen to hear people's thoughts. Now, moving on to our second comment of the video, we have a comment from Sir Isaac Fortescue, and he says, as for my pick for an underrated Warriors game, personally, I'd have to say Warriors Orochi 4. While yes, it does have its flaws, I still think that there's a lot to like in this game. The character interactions, the magic and sacred treasure moves, the amazing graphics, and while the story is a little bit weird, there are still aspects that I like, such as Athena and Loki's character arcs. However, is Warriors Orochi 4 the best game? Heck no, but I can't say it's as bad as everyone makes it out to be. And personally, I'd say that there's a bit of nuance to this question, which I'll try and address appropriately, because I'm just going to preface this now. I do kind of disagree with what you're saying here. So let's look at some of the pros here. I do think it's great that we finally have a combined game for the characters of Samurai Warriors 4 and Dynasty Warriors 8. Of course, we have Warriors Abyss, but that's not exactly the same thing. But we also get some returning extra characters like Ryu Hayabusa and Achilles. But I do think that this one is more of a matter of personal preference, but I guess that's the nature of the conversation that we're having anyway. And I don't know, I really can't shake the choice of just going towards the Greek mythology route. It just, to me, feels kind of random and out of place. Plus, I do think that there are some pretty major design choices that hurt this game too much, such as the menus, and yeah, I don't know. Overall, to me, it just kind of feels like a downgrade from Warriors Orochi 3, with the inclusion, obviously, of better movesets from, say, the Samurai Warriors 4 era. And in a way, I actually think that Warriors Orochi 4 actually plays and feels like it's running off of, say, the Dynasty Warriors 8 engine. Like, everyone kind of plays like they're from Dynasty Warriors 8, which is fine if you're playing as a Dynasty Warriors character, but I actually feel like the combat feels off if you're playing as a Samurai Warriors character. But anyway, I digress. If I am to try to view this through a similar lens as your comment here, I'd say that what is potentially underrated is the story, as a decent amount of people have seemingly had a stronger negative reaction to this title overall, and perhaps it's not given the chance that it's deserved. And that's kind of like the angle or the tone that I'm kind of picking up on here from your comment. But I don't know, if there was something that I would speculate on, it would be how much better this game could have performed if it hadn't have been released soon after Dynasty Warriors 9. I think the fatigue of mediocrity from any of these games had truly set in by this point, and I think that it would have been one of Warriors Orochi 4's biggest enemies here. I think people were really looking for a win after Dynasty Warriors 8, and from what I've seen from reviews and just from discussions that I've had with people from the community, it really seems like the general sentiment is that Koei kind of threw in the towel here with Warriors Orochi 4, so I don't know. Do I think it is underrated? I don't think I would. I think that, it still sold relatively well from what I've seen, and it is still technically the newest Warriors Orochi game, and I think a lot of people seem to still play it. But yeah, I'm not quite sure I'd say that this one is underrated, outside of perhaps the story like you're alluding to. Alrighty, so moving on to the next comment, we have a submission from another fellow warrior of Craig's army, and that is Mega Hobbit. And for Mega Hobbit's underrated game, he has gone with Warriors Orochi 3. Now with this comment, it says, I feel like it's often overlooked by the community as Warriors Orochi 2Z kind of takes the spot of peak Warriors Orochi, and Warriors Orochi 1, well, it was the first, so it had to be memorable. But 3 feels like the Sun Quan of Warriors Orochi, in the shadows of what came before, even though it wasn't as notorious as Warriors Orochi 4. Warriors Orochi 3 is underrated because it definitely did a lot more than what most people saw. Most had a unique moveset, and now that I think about it, Dynasty Warriors 7 had many copy and paste movesets, and Warriors Orochi 3 fixed that and did what they did in Dynasty Warriors 5 and gave everyone different special or strong attacks. And I also found that the soundtrack was a really great blend. The story was incredibly dark, and the more you played, the more you saw the light at the end of the tunnel, as well as introducing some fascinating characters such as Shuten Doji and Susanoo, and the map designs felt more fitting of the Bane of the Serpent's influence being kind of almost everywhere. So I guess there's a couple of things to address with this comment, but first of all, I'm wondering if people may consider Warriors Orochi Z to be the peak, as it's kind of like a white whale in my opinion, one that wasn't released to the West and more or less combines everything from Warriors Orochi 1 and Warriors Orochi 2. That, and it also uses the Dynasty Warriors 5 and Samurai Warriors 2 generation of characters, which are arguably the most popular and nostalgic from either of the series. Now, I would actually go against what you're saying here. I'd actually argue that Warriors Orochi 3 isn't underrated, and that's because commercially it actually did quite well with selling over 1.5 million copies overall. However, if I were to share an element of this game that could be considered underrated or unique, it would be how much value, content, and polish that this game has, or how much depth it has compared to other Musou titles. You know, with its bond system, the stage unlock system, giving everyone unique movesets, as you said, I think that is incredible in and of itself. It's going the extra mile to not just bring in all these clone characters that we had at the time. So I think that's amazing. Also, it had this quasi battlefield editor mode and just in general, just a multitude of bonus content, which I think is amazing. Also, the characters feel amazing to play, and it just so happens to be that it has some of the best character designs as well from the whole series. As far as the story goes, you know, it just works. It doesn't feel like something that was slapped together so that way all of our heroes could just fight together. The time travel element of this game actually fit the tone and the story, and I just think it's a brilliant game. But as far as being underrated goes, I feel like I often see that people cite Warriors Orochi 3 as being the best, and that's just from my personal experience. But I'm curious to see if people, you know, obviously disagree with this take in the comments. I'd really love to hear people's thoughts here. I do understand what you're saying though. Like, I do think that people really do seem to romanticize or put Warriors Orochi Z on a pedestal because it's basically the ultimate version of both Warriors Orochi 1 and 2. But I do think that there is a broad appreciation for Warriors Orochi 3. Okie dokie, now moving on to our next comment of the video, we have a submission from Jacob Robbins, and that is that Dynasty Warriors Strikeforce is a unique twist on the game. And I absolutely agree, this is such a weird game. This is such a weird but unique experience. And I don't know, it's like Koei just went from having this generally shallow and mixed game release of Dynasty Warriors 6, and then they were just like, you know what, fuck it. I'm gonna slam a Red Bull, punch a hole in the wall, make everyone Super Saiyan and fly around in these little zones and checkpoints. And we're just gonna bake in some pretty great, although somewhat light RPG mechanics and just take the series in a different route, even though it is, for the most part, just a random spin-off title. But this game was innovative. It introduced weapon swapping. This game also gives every character their own Super Saiyan mode and model, which is awesome. And Strikeforce also introduces the town system where you can buy and upgrade skills and equipment, and yeah, I just think that that is so fucking cool. Sure, the game's not perfect. It definitely focuses more on the skirmishes and objectives rather than all-out war that we're used to with the mainline titles. Maybe a minor criticism, but I definitely feel like this is a game that was designed for the PSP, but then received a port or a HD port to the main consoles like the PS3 and the Xbox 360 consoles, because if you really think about it, with how limited or restricted the zones are, it honestly does kind of feel like you're playing like a Game Boy or a PSP game, but on the console, if that's the platform you happen to be playing on. But overall, I would say yes, this game absolutely underrated for what it is, and yeah, couldn't agree more. Alrighty, up next we have a comment from, I'm honestly scared to try and pronounce this one, Chorted. I'm so sorry if I butchered that, but we've got Dynasty Warriors next. Now, while it's a bit short for a Dynasty Warriors game, it does have fun gameplay and a neat way of storytelling. Basically, you have your map based with your kingdom slowly taking over the land while having a slightly abridged version of the usual story. It's a shame that it's stuck on the Vita, and I would absolutely say that it is an underrated game purely based on that reason that you touched on right at the end there, accessibility or the lack thereof. So this game is only available on the PS Vita, so if you want to play it today, it would be fairly fucking expensive, I would guess. This game is set in the Dynasty Warriors 7 era of the games, and it appears to blend the gameplay of a normal Dynasty Warriors game with a portable PSP Musou gaming aesthetic that we would come to expect of the time. That, and there's also a decent amount of touchscreen mechanics to make the gameplay relatively unique as well. I think for what the game is and the platform it was released on, I'd absolutely say that this game is underrated. And I don't know, I just think it's a shame that we never really got any sort of port to another console to preserve this game, because this was always a game that I really wanted to try out, and I thought it was really unique and kind of felt like Dynasty Warriors meets Infinity Blade, if anyone remembers the Infinity Blade iOS games. But yeah, it's a real shame that it's really hard to access because, yeah, this game looks like a banger. Alrighty, for our 6th comment, we actually have another comment from a fellow channel member, and that is Lup. And Lup here has nominated the underrated game Dynasty Warriors Volume 2. Gosh, we have a lot of PSP games in this list today. Lup says, it's not a perfect game, but it tried to do something different. I think the limitations of the console sometimes made the devs get a little more creative, and Dynasty Warriors Volume 2 is a good example of that. I love how it was kind of turn-based a la Dynasty Tactics or a Fire Emblem style game, but it's still a Musou game at its core, and I loved collecting all those officers. It was a really good idea. I wanted Godseekers to be something like this, but yeah. So just like Dynasty Warriors Gundam 2, I'm also going to say that it's pretty hard to say whether this game is underrated or not, purely based on the fact that I just haven't played this game firsthand, given the hardware that it was released on. But what I can say is that it is based on the Dynasty Warriors 5 design, and it shows a more stripped back interpretation of the mainline Musou game. I'd say that the combat and mechanics overall look mostly the same as the mainline title's counterpart. However, you're fighting through these smaller zones rather than this massive connected battlefield. So maybe in a way this is kind of similar to the zones that we see in Dynasty Warriors Strikeforce, but obviously this game came out in like 2006. The graphics are fairly impressive considering the hardware it was released on. And I'd also say that, as Lup mentioned, there's kind of like a turn-based mechanic in this game. So when you are saying turn-based mechanic, I'm assuming that you're meaning with the area or the tile system where you clear out an area and you return to the top-down view of the battlefield or the menu where you get to choose the next tile or area you get to advance in. So as far as underrated goes, I'd say just like Dynasty Warriors Next, I'd probably agree that this game is underrated purely just based on accessibility. And out of curiosity, I also tried looking into the overall sales for this title specifically, and it does look like there was only roughly 350,000 units sold. I guess considering the hardware, that's pretty impressive, but yeah, definitely nothing like the numbers of the mainline game. So yeah, if you think that it's underrated, I can't say that I disagree with that. Alrighty, moving on to our final 2. So our next comment is from Inquisitorial Love, and that is that Samurai Warriors 2 Empires was an absolute banger that added just enough zest to the Empires format to stand out as amazing without absolutely gutting what people love about it. Now, I will agree with his comment in the sense that, yeah, I agree, this game is an absolute banger. But as far as underrated goes, I would actually say that this game is appropriately rated or well received. Now, obviously that's just an assumption from first-hand experience with this title, but also, I guess, just my bias. I think that this is an incredible game. But being released in an era where the Samurai Warriors series was likely at its peak popularity, coming off the back of an excellent release with Samurai Warriors 2, and also just from first-hand experience, like I said, I just know that this game was actually more easily accessible in EB Games at the time than the vanilla title, which is crazy to think of. But I don't know, I just think that overall this game got so much right with the Empire's feel and vibe, and its balance of strategy and combat was spot on. Plus, this is the first Empires game that we got for the Samurai Warriors series too, so I'm sure that people would have been foaming at the mouth to get an Empires experience from the Samurai Warriors series, but overall, just going back to the whole idea of it being underrated or overrated, would I say that Samurai Warriors 2 Empires is underrated compared to a mainline entry? Absolutely. I think all of the Empires titles are. It's for a more dedicated audience that are into a more strategic experience from the Musou series. So it's definitely a niche experience and, well, audience. But would I say that this game is underrated for an Empires title? I'm not so sure that I would say that it is. I think that it's appropriately appreciated. Moving on to our final comment, we have Prince Kerfuffle, and Prince Kerfuffle says, Warriors All-Stars is incredibly underrated, bringing all of Koei Tecmo's franchises together for a silly Warriors-style game that was one of the most entertaining things I have played since Warriors Orochi. Especially playing as William from Neo. I remember playing the first mission with him, and since everything was in Japanese, I just assumed that his voice would be as well. Only to then, in the middle of battle, hear, I have slain an officer from him or something, and just cracked up. Such a great game. Now, let's talk about Warriors All-Star. So I actually agree, I do think that this game is underrated, but I also have a theory as to why. So anyone who knows more information about this, please correct me in the comments. I'm sure that I'm wrong here. But from my understanding, when Warriors All-Stars was announced, it was supposed to be the future or the new direction of the combined Musou franchises in one game, a Koei collection, if you will. And it was rumored to be basically the next evolution of the Warriors Orochi series, or basically the series that would be replacing Warriors Orochi, as that series was heavily revolved around just the Dynasty and Samurai Warriors series. So with the idea of Koei opening the floodgates with all of their other IP, I think people were really excited for that. But when people realized that it was only going to be a select few characters from the different IP, I feel like that's when the excitement started to dissipate with this title. And yes, while I think it is awesome that we did get to explore other series characters like William from Neo, and we also had other returning characters like Ryu Hayabusa from Ninja Gaiden and so on, I just think that this was more of a misstep, or maybe less of what people were hoping for. I don't know. That, and I also just think that the whole magical Three Kingdoms conflict, but not amongst Wei Wu or Shu, but instead amongst three tribes of furries, I just don't think that it was as broadly appealing as the Warriors Orochi series. But with all of that being said though, I have actually been trying to pick it up more lately to familiarize myself with the gameplay, and I'd actually say that it does look and feel really solid. And it's genuinely great to play as characters like William, and yeah, I don't know. Overall, I'd just say that All-Stars is probably more underrated overall, but I think it's because it just doesn't have that same appeal as the Warriors Orochi titles. But I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. We're going to wrap it up there for today's video, everyone. And just remember, like I said up top, leave your comments below on who you think is the most wildly overrated Samurai or Dynasty Warriors character. And we're going to pick up those comments and respond to them in the next video in March. I hope everyone has enjoyed this content. And remember, if you want to gain access to our members only content, you can join as a channel member for as little as 99 cents per month. And I'll leave a link in the description below.